everyone and welcome back to another video where I'm going to talk about my CD collection. This is part 4, where I'm going to show you some of the CDs that are in my collection. If you don't know any of these albums and you find the genre to be to your liking, I highly suggest you to go and listen to those albums because you might discover something new that you would like. And with all that being said, you know how it is. I'm going to leave a playlist with the previous videos with my vinyl SCD collection in the description, and I'm going to show 5 of my CDs in a semi-chronological order. With that being said, let's get right into the video. The first one I'm going to show over here is Let's Get Killed by David Holmes. In my opinion, this is one of my favorite albums of all time. And it's an album from the 90s, it's from 1997, but I discovered it years later, it was around 5 years ago, I believe so. Maybe it might be more than 5 years, but the thing with this album is that it's not an album that I discovered when I was a kid back in the 2000s, but it sounds a lot like something that I would hear back in the 2000s when I would be a little kid, so it had a lot of nostalgia feel to it, in my opinion. Even though I didn't hear the album before, it feels like something I would listen to back in the day, and it had a vibe that I really liked. So this album is basically made from David Holmes, who is mostly known to be a film music composer, but in this occasion he made this really special album that has elements of sort of trip-hop music, that has lots of smooth jazz and funky elements to it. There are lots of small interludes in between tracks, enhancing the whole atmosphere and the experience of the album. This album has definitely some of the best interludes I've heard in an album, having all of those samples with people talking about their life in New York, and it's a really well crafted album. It has this really nice insert over here with all those great pictures, this collage of pictures in some occasions being repeated together, and the whole aesthetic of this album is really excellent, and it's definitely one of the most fascinating albums I've found in recent years. And the more I've listened to it, the more I just discovered some great stuff around it. And when I first heard this album, there was actually the track Rodney Yates that I didn't heard of before. For some reason, when I heard of this album, I wasn't aware of this track, but Rodney Yates is also another great track. Pretty much all of this album contains banger after banger after banger. There are so many great tracks, there are some really nice and smooth bass lines, and the whole album, while it sounds like it's something from the 90s, I could say it sounds really ahead of its time, and there are some really nice production values in this album in particular. I also found about this album from a magazine that had a list with the top 100 albums of the 90s, and I'm really surprised that this was in this list because this is a really great album that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about, and it was a really pleasant surprise, and I discovered one of my favorite albums of all time. This album, like I said, it's really chill, but it's also really catchy at parts. The self-titled track also has some elements of old school drum and bass to it. There's also the track Don't Die Just Yet that goes into a more rock direction. This album has lots of different stylistic approaches, and in my opinion, what he does with this album, it feels really complete and it feels like a really well crafted album. In my opinion, definitely go and check this one out. Let's Get Killed by David Holmes, an impressive album. The same day I also bought this classic over here. I don't think there are lots of things to say about this album. This is The Man Machine by Kraftwerk, one of the most classic electronic albums of all time, one of the most defining albums when it comes to electronic music. Kraftwerk were one of the first examples of electronic music being more catchy, being more rhythmic, and getting more into the pop side of things, having a more mainstream appeal to the audience. With this album and with Trans Europe Express, in my opinion, they revolutionized electronic music. And the album, yeah, it definitely sounds way ahead of its time, and I think it sounds refreshing up until this day. This whole lifeless robotic approach definitely turned a lot of people off back in the day, but nowadays it comes as something really revolutionary and really interesting for its time, and there are so many classic tracks in this one. I also like that there is this whole insert over here having all of those pictures of the band members. I think they have done a really good job with this repress over here, having all of those different pictures. But like I said, yeah, so many classic tracks in here, like The Robots, Metropolis, The Model. It's a really short album, it's only 6 tracks. It goes for about 30 minutes or something. It's a really short album and it's straight to the point. There's not that much to say about this other than it's a classic album. It's one of the most defining albums in an entire genre of electronic music. Those German legends made a really impressive album for its time. And if you haven't heard of this already, then you owe this to yourself, especially if you're into electronic music. This is one of the must in the genre. But now let's get into the more industrial and edgy side of things with Harsh Laser by Alien Vampires. This one is the limited expanded edition containing of 2 CDs, the second one being Evil Bloody Music, which contains remixes of some of the tracks on the first album, Harsh Laser. And in my opinion, Harsh Laser was an album that, let's just first say that the thing that intrigued me in this album is this album cover. And like, if you know me and you know my edgy approach on music, I think you can definitely see why. This is the version of the double CD over here. This is the back to it. Yeah, we're talking about an extremely edgy approach on music, and while this is quite explicit, I can't show the insert over here because I have to censor the nipples over here. But yeah, we have a few of the lyrics out of these tracks for some reason. I don't know why they did that, instead of putting the lyrics from every song right here. But yeah, we have the CD one right there, and you open right here and you have the second CD with the remixes, which there are some quite decent remixes, but yeah, it doesn't come up even close to the original album, which it's an album that, like I said, I just got intrigued to it due to its album cover and I decided to go and listen to it. At first I thought there were some really great tracks, but I decided to come back to this album again and again and again, and it has become one of my favorite agrotech albums of all time. This is a prime example of really edgy and really heavy agrotech. And in my opinion, there are also some other moments that might feel a bit more sad, a bit more melancholic. There are some great approaches on industrial dance music in this one, and while they have done a lot of different albums, in my opinion, this is by far their best one, and like I said, one of my favorite in the entire genre. They also have this sort of little small insert over here, and they also have, I'm going to show you right now, they have this poster over here. I really love having something that edgy in my room. Lots of people probably won't be able to get through this album, and that's fine, and I can definitely understand why. It revolves around religious themes, BDSM, you know, your typical edgy stuff, and it's just that I love what they did with the music on this one. I think they had some great ideas and lots of memorable tracks, like lots and lots of memorable tracks. And I like that in some of the occasions they also got into a more sort of industrial metal direction. And I love the production to this thing. I love the sort of more exceptional vocals to this. The vocals don't get to the quality of Hosiko or Suicide Commando, but still they're pretty interesting to say at least. And yeah, this is a great release from Alfa Matrix, and like I said, one of my favorite agrotech albums of all time. You're probably not going to agree with me, but that's just my opinion. I definitely though encourage you to go and give this one a shot if you're into this kind of genre and if you just want something really edgy. And we're also talking about a very long album that goes for about 70 minutes. And yeah, that's what I have to say about Harsh Laser. Keeping on with the industrial side of things, another release from Alfa Matrix, which is one of my favorite albums of all time, is Hearts from Bullets by Area. It's also an album that I think it's by far the best out of the artist compared to everything else he has done up until this point. And this one, like you can see, it goes more to the synth pop oriented side of things. It's not like your really heavy agrotech style of album, which is also a direction that I really like and I dig for. And I am also a guy that I like this whole pinky and flashy aesthetic. Vocally, you don't have screams or growls over here, but what you have is definitely some really nice instrumentals, and in general some really nice clean vocals, and also some nice lyrical content about love, depression. And it's also an album that has a really nice concept to it, and I think that it flows pretty well with all of the tracks having so many different great moments like Bad List, Insect Calm, Invisible, and Blue Alice as well, and Hearts for Bullets being some of my favorite songs over here. And the more I listen to this album, the more I discover that I just love pretty much almost the entire thing out of this. It's also an album that I would completely understand why you wouldn't be a fan of it. Like I said, it's more of a synth pop oriented album with more of an edgy attitude to it. But yeah, another great release from Alfa Matrix in my opinion, and I really love this album as well. And oh boy, do I have more industrial for you, another release from Alfa Matrix, and this is The Failure Epiphany by Internal, an album that goes to the most depressive side of industrial and agrotech music. Really dark and devastating electronic album over here. It goes to some more rhythmic noise stuff, it's way more distorted, the vocals from Internal are way too harsh, there's a lot of distortion, there are a lot of screams, and in general the whole melodies in this thing, they're really dark, and the whole atmosphere of this thing make it much more than your typical sort of catchy and dancey stuff. We're talking about a really disturbing and really devastating album. It's a really edgy one, that's for sure, but you know, its whole approach on nihilism, depression, and self-destruct, I think it also reflects really well with the music on this thing being really aggressive and really sad at the same time. And yeah, with that being said, I've basically shown three different directions of modern industrial music. Island Vampires being aggressive and catchy, Area being more synth pop and catchy, and this one being aggressive but really depressing and not that catchy. And yeah, go and pick what you prefer out of these styles. And yeah, that's about it for today. These are the 5 CDs I wanted to show you today. What's your opinion on these albums? If you have heard of them, do you like them, dislike them, why? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.